What's going on, y'all? It's LJ, and it's time once again to film what is one of my favorite videos to watch and one of my favorite videos to make, and that is to share and see what's been keeping the turntable warm for the last month. Here we go. Now, the first one isn't a record at all, because I don't have this on vinyl. It's a cassette. Why not? I own a few of them. From 1988, this is Sabbath's History of a Time to Come. This is UK thrash on the Tiny Noise Records label, who could rival Metal Blade and Roadrunner at the time in terms of roster quality. Technical and ahead of its time by at least a couple of years, this one is punishing, but it doesn't punish you from start to finish. Instead, it's full of complex time signature changes, varying tempos and ideas, but it never leaves that thrash battlefield. Savagely raspy vocals and no shortage of neck-breaking riffs and solos from Andy Sneap. Thrash debuts this strong were and are few and far between. This is a phenomenal album, and it's one that was sent to me a long time ago by fellow YouTuber Scott Waters. Inside the case was the receipt from the original purchase, and this was picked up at the now defunct Hastings Records in Albuquerque, New Mexico, for a total of $10.52 on April 19, 1990. 26 years later, here's a video tribute. Who says cassettes can't last? Now, a little newer, a lot newer, from 2013, here is Sin Starlet's Throat Attack. This is the second album from Switzerland-based new wave of traditional heavy metal band, and it's an album that would have fit right in had it been released in 1984. This is full of old school heavy metal intensity, choruses, and more hooks than a tackle box. The songs just gallop along, with like a number of the Beast era Iron Maiden type energy, and vocals that are a huge nod to Defenders of the Faith era Judas Priest. With influences like many new wave of traditional heavy metal bands worn proudly on their sleeve, it's what they're doing. They're continuing, driving it forward instead of letting it die out. You just check out tracks like Edge of the World and Headed by the Hex, on YouTube for just a couple of molten examples of why this one's worth spinning until your head explodes. Next up, from 1987, I feel like I don't even need to say anything. Does anybody not watching this video not know what this is? In the event that you don't, or in the event that for some ridiculous reason over time you decided you didn't like this is Slayer's South of Heaven. Now, first and foremost, let's align on one thing. Slayer can do no wrong. Yeah? Are we good? Okay, cool. Now this, Personal History, was my very first Slayer album that I fully immersed myself in when it was still a new release. I had heard Hell Awaits, I had heard Show No Mercy through friends that had them, but it's when you buy it for the first time, that's when that relationship begins. And this was the first Slayer album I bought when it was still a new release. And to that extent, it's the one that I brought home and just played into oblivion. And to this day, and probably for that reason, it's not my favorite Slayer album. See, that doesn't make sense. Because it was after this that I became a huge Slayer fan. And the next album, Seasons in the Abyss, I awaited so intently, pre-ordered, couldn't wait, had to have it. That, to this day, is my favorite Slayer album, and only narrowly. Because South of Heaven is absolutely unbelievable. Spill the Blood, Mandatory Suicide, South of Heaven, Silent Scream, Ghosts of War. Slayer proved here, after Hell Awaits, that they could slow it down, add in a little bit of melody, and still send people to the hospital with whiplash. With every note, every lyric long since burned into my brain, I did something new. I spun this one for the first time in 25 years through headphones last month. And man, my ears freaking rang for days. Now, from 2010, for me, here's the album that kickstarted my entire obsession with the new wave of traditional heavy metal. And it is White Wizzard's Over the Top. Another reason why vinyl. I just look at the cover. Regardless, this is my personal favorite of the 4 absolutely amazing, brilliant records White Wizzard has released, and it was the debut of Wyatt Anderson on vocals. That's kind of significant. It actually marked the most stable lineup White Wizzard ever saw. And by that, I mean 3 of 5 members actually hung around for another album. Like Megadeth, well, they're a lot like Megadeth in that respect, I guess, just a revolving door of members. That's here nor there. But like Megadeth's Marty Friedman and Nick Menza period before them, this lineup was easily not only White Wizzard's most stable, but most magical. Absolutely epic, over the top, vocals from Wyatt Screaming Demon Anderson, punishing Steve Harris-style bass lines from John Leon, as always, and shredding leads from Eric and Chad, and I mean, Giovanni was the drummer at this time. His drum kit pyrotechnics are just what ram it all home. Again, add in one of the best cover images I've seen in the last decade, and it's hands down the White Wizzard album I would choose for the time capsule. Now, flash forward 6 years to 2016, and I couldn't be more excited that a new album is finally in progress. Not only that, Wyatt is back with mic in hand, James LaRue is back from the debut, he's plugged in, and the phoenix that is White Wizzard is ready to rise from the ashes. From 1988, this is Ozzy Osbourne's No Rest for the Wicked. Does anybody not know this album? I love grabbing classic Ozzy off the shelf and spinning it because you just know it so well. It's like a friend. This was the introduction of Zakk Wylde, and this is honestly the last time an Ozzy album truly sounded like, well, an Ozzy album. And I mean, if you grew up in the 80s or the 70s and you were into Ozzy at the time, you know what I mean. Because No More Tears that came after this was excellent, but a different sounding album. This album is not perfect, but it is full of elements from what made every 80s Ozzy album up to this so epic. It's just full of great tracks. Ozzy may be the only frontman, now that if I think about it, that's just been blessed enough to have 3 of the most gifted guitarists in metal history ride by his side. Here, plucked from small town obscurity, Zakk Wylde stands proudly alongside Randy Rhoads and Jakey Lee on an album full of solid, heavy Ozzy tracks, including my personal all-time Ozzy favorite, Breaking All the Rules. Randy Castillo's drum tracks are dead on, and man, that cover! If ever a discussion about Bay Area thrash metal starts up, wherever you are, and this album or this band is not mentioned, you stop that discussion immediately and you course correct it. From 1987, here is Death Angel's debut, The Ultraviolent. You simply can't talk Bay Area thrash metal without mentioning this record. Recorded by a group of teenagers and released the same year, same time as other Bay Area gems like Testament's debut, The Legacy, Exodus's Pleasure of the Flesh, The Ultraviolent marches right in line with neck-breaking thrash, with tracks like Mistress of Pain and Final Death. This is balanced by cuts like the insanely catchy Voracious Souls, what an amazing song, and IPFS. And it's driven by just these possessed vocals, string-bending solos, and a relentless, non-stop drum attack. It just becomes more and more over the years my go-to Death Angel album, which used to be the album that came 2 after this one, Act 3. But man, as time wears on, I just find myself keep going back to this one. It is, without question, a top 10 thrash classic. Back to the new wave of traditional heavy metal, and one of my 2 absolute favorite bands from that particular niche. From 2009, here is Cauldrons, Chained to the Night. You know, you got this instrumental intro called Cauldron Call, and that readies the rifles. And then lead-off track, Young and Hungry hits. Cauldron rallies and announces that they're here to stay on their first full length. Gone Forever is the doom vibe that vocalist Jason Decay's former band, Goathorn, had nailed down. And the traditional metal of the Cauldron sound with cleaner vocals from Jay is born. I absolutely love both bands. Cauldron, Goathorn, both are phenomenal. Chained Up in Chains was an instant classic, and the video's on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's just the birth of that eerie Ian Chains guitar tone that he manages to slip in between the chainsaw riffing and solos to create just this very unique melodic sense that is Cauldron's calling card. And as a three-piece, if you don't have some tricks up your sleeve on guitar, man, you could just slip right on by unnoticed. Ian rises above and just creates this tone that just matches Jay's lyrics perfectly. And the two of them have been the steady Cauldron members from day one, made for one another. 7 years and 3 releases later, still no sign of letting up, and Chained Up to the Night remains an immediate new wave of traditional heavy metal classic. Here's an absolutely unexpected and inexpensive find. From 1969, this is Raven. And with that cover, you know it had to come home. This is Raven's debut. I knew nothing about this band, and I learned it's their only album, and it is an outstanding slab of late 60s American blues rock. It packs this Albert King, Muddy Waters, Savoy Brown, Allman Brothers kind of vibe. And with tracks that run from laid back and bluesy like Green Mountain Dream to up-tempo foot-tapping numbers like Frumpy and No Turning Back, and all of those are available on YouTube. Go check them out. It's got even it's stretch your wing kind of 10-minute jams. I think it's called Bad News. One hell of an album. And for what it's worth, while I was reading up on it, I read that these guys opened up for Zeppelin in Boston right around that 1969 time frame. Man, what a show that must have been. Just about at the bottom of the stack, here's one that I showed in a recent vinyl finds just a couple months back. From 1991, it is Sepultura's Arise. I mean, I'm almost out of great things to say about this record. I purchased this brand new on cassette in 1991, and it's on the cassette wall. And only recently was I finally able to add an original pressing to the vinyl collection. This album, let's be honest, has no chance of getting filed away on the shelf anytime soon. I might actually need to find a backup copy because I'm at risk of spinning the grooves off this one. For Arise, Sepultura took the thrash brilliance of 1989's Beneath the Remains. They pushed that envelope just a bit further, and they created without question what was their most and what is their most amazing front to back album. Technical perfection, executed with atmosphere, riffs, solos, and rhythms that crush your skull like a vice. Every single track worthy of the non-existent thrash metal Hall of Fame. Not a single wasted second, and an album I can confidently say no thrash collection is complete without on some format. CD, cassette, vinyl, hell, make yourself an 8-track. Just add this one to your collection if you don't have it already. Speaking of down and out classics from 1986, here is King Diamond's solo debut, Fatal Portrait. This is an original pressing on Road Racer, and one that never fails to pull me back into the 80s where it all began. This was the perfect teenage Saturday night album. Fatal Portrait was not my first King Diamond LP. That was the then newly released album, Them. And it took me no time after falling in love with that to circle back to Abigail and Fatal Portrait. The only challenge at the time was finding the money to pick them up. Now, Fatal Portrait was released as Merciful Fate Dissolved, but still packing half that band and sung almost entirely in that love 'em or hate 'em King Diamond type vocals. It is jacked with atmosphere, but still straightforward, full of insane skill, ability, and slammed full of classic tracks like The Candle, Dressed in White, Halloween, and more. Absolutely perfect from start to finish, and it set the course for King Diamond's entire career. Rounding things out, here's an album that was recently sent to me by fellow YouTuber EJD715 from 2005. Here is Municipal Waste's Hazardous Mutation. I was only vaguely familiar with Municipal Waste. You know, complete with cover art from legendary thrash artist Ed Repka. This second full-length and first major label release from the Virginia-based band, it wastes absolutely no time in meshing this hardcore, kind of DRI-like ethic with traditional thrash elements, and it only takes them a whopping 26 minutes to unapologetically smash your face in. From vocals to song structures to musicianship to track length, this one borrows so heavily the blueprint from one of my other absolute favorite albums, the 1986 debut from Nuclear Assault, Game Over. And for that, it's hardly inventive. But I doubt these guys had any intention of rebuilding the foundation or breaking new ground. And rather, they just took aim at keeping a classic era alive, went for it, and it worked. This is a fantastic record. And that's it, y'all. There's another month worth of spins. Hope you dug it. Feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll see you all in the next video. Later.